Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new edition of Low Code Café, episode 24. This week, and actually since 2 weeks ago, we started building this new series of our webinar where we focus more on extending the platform through code with new integrations, new actions, new buttons, new form fields, new templates, and so on. So far, we looked at creating new actions 2 weeks ago, and last week we looked at creating new listing templates, and we built a very nice listing with images that flip over, and you can see data. So it's very nice use case of how to build custom UI. This webinar, for those of you that are new, this webinar happens every week at Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central Time. And it's an event where we meet with the community, but also with our team to discuss what's coming in our product, but also get feedback from you. And finally, also see some hands-on part, like what we learn on our support channel, but also building something very specific like we are going to do today too. All these webinars are recorded and they are available on our YouTube channels. So since they are 1 hour long, we already have 23 hours of recording, but we did a nice part. We put chapters on each videos. So they are easy to navigate to see different parts, and you might be interested only in the hands-on part, then you go and only see that part easily. So make sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our webinar recording, but as well other videos that our team does an awesome job at putting 1-2 every week on doing very specific things with Plantain app. We have the same agenda pretty much every week where I will give you some updates on what happens with our company and with the community. And then we'll get more into the product with Reza, our head of product, that will show us some features and also give us some timelines about what's coming and when. And then we'll have this hands-on part from the trenches with Del Warner, our head of support. He's learning a lot of things from our community on the support channel that are useful to a broader audience. So we'll learn out of that. And finally, we have the biggest chunk, which is the hands-on development. And today, what we will be doing is implement data sources for our product. So whenever you have a dropdown, the items that come that show in the dropdown could come from various systems, right? So we'll show you how you can implement those kind of things through C# so you can connect systems. Please engage with us in any way you have at your disposal in Zoom, chat, Q&A, voice. And also there will be a feedback form coming after the webinar. So we'd love to hear your feedback on how we can improve to make this event even more powerful to you, even more useful to you. So to give you a big overview of what's been happening with us since last week, you know, we have this equity crowdfunding going on. So basically anyone can be an investor in Plantain app, own a stake in our company, and besides participating in growth, also take benefits in that growth that we do together. We are currently at 126K that we raised so far from 300 investors, and we still have around 2.5 months to go. So there's still an opportunity to attract more investments. So our goal actually would be to close it at 500K at this point. And that seems that is still doable. And we are going to put more effort into attracting this kind of investor. So that's a good thing happening, because as we need to grow this fast, because low code is such a big thing and there are many players out there. And we know, and people that use Plantain app know, that our technology is far better to most of the local solution out there, if not all, you know, but in order to scale this, to make it possible, we do need funding to move fast. So thanks to everyone that already invested. It's already part of this story, and we'll look forward to see what we are doing and next year. Also, last week we announced that we are part of this pitch at European Bank of Reconstruction and Development. They have this program is related to COVID, and actually they are going to have the pitch tomorrow. So wish us good luck. And then it's a very good program. There are 15 finalists and there will be 5 winners. And the winners get 100K in prize, but more importantly, they get access to a big network. The program is very well connected to the European and US market. So it's a very good opportunity for us. And we'll do this tomorrow. And I will make sure to communicate the results, which will be in about 1 week anyway. Also, every week, I started maybe since 6 editions ago to show you a use case every week to see how the applicability of PlanTanApp. When would you use PlanTanApp? What kind of problems would you use to solve PlanTanApp? So this week I want to talk to you about a transport management system. So in the logistics industry, and in particular, this customer, it's a Romanian customer, but with European operations. So what they do, they transport this kind of guns, ammunitions, and explosives all over the Europe. You know, so if you think about it, it's a very regulated space. These transports cross a number of borders, and each country would have their own specific legislation to how these goods should be transported. So this organization was doing everything on spreadsheets and on paper. So they came to us looking to automate all of this. So we built a system where they can manage the documentation that they need for each transport per country, and partners have access to contribute their documentation from their specific countries. You know, say in the end, when they say that they want a transport from point A to point B, the system automatically detects all the countries that the transport needs to cross and figure out if it already has the documentation for every country or if it needs additional documentation. You know? So this streamlined operations quite a bit, and they were able to double the number of transports that they do with the same resources. So it's a great success story. We have other use cases in this logistics space, and I will present it over time. But again, if you are interested to learn more about this particular use case, reach out and we'll arrange a demo. We received this request that maybe in this webinar we can show, do demos and show more. So I think maybe that will be a series at some point, because the audience is very narrow right now. We do this technical approach to extending the platform. So then we need to match this content to the audience. So if it's too business, the technical people might not be interested. If it's too technical, the business people might not be interested. So then we'll announce this in time and target it so the right people can join and get the most out of it. But in the meantime, if you want to see this kind of system, if you relate to it, if you have customers, partners that might be a good fit for it, we can do a demo. So just reach out. Also, we announced it 2 weeks ago, and we'll send some official communication this week about the 30-day trial that you can install on-premise on your existing DNN instance. It doesn't break anything. So it's a seamless experience of transitioning from using DNN and DNN Sharp modules towards using the entire platform. Now, it's a very smooth transition. It goes well. It's a few clicks to deploy everything, and improves experience quite a lot. So if you haven't already done so, as a DNN Sharp customer, make sure to download the trial, test it out, and let us know your feedback. Cool. So if there are no questions so far, I will invite Reza to take over to give us maybe a nice demo that he prepared to us, and also give us set us the right expectation for the next release and beyond. Reza.
Thanks, Bogdan. Yeah, hi everyone. We've got a lot of coding to do here today, so I'm gonna move a little quick. Really, we do have a lot of neat stuff coming, and I'm gonna show you a few of them today. The new skin, we've got the new calendar view coming, ability to clone workflows, full screen token editor, DNN 9.8 Telerik removed compatibility, lots of little fixes and enhancements and things like that. And we're still tracking for our release candidate for next week, Monday or Tuesday. If anyone's interested in getting their hands on that early and maybe helping us with a little bit of UAT, would appreciate that. Like I said, this one under the hood especially has got some pretty big refactoring of code and changes and improvements, upgrades of versions of dependencies that our software runs on. And so it'd be great if we could get a couple extra sets of eyes on it. If all that goes well next week, then we are still aiming to get out the stable release before the end of the year. It's going to be very contingent on that testing and the user acceptance testing. I want to make sure we always only put good things out. So that 12/28 is a bit soft at the moment. It's really going to depend on how this week and next week goes with the testing. So given that, I wanted to jump in and show you guys a couple of cool things. So what we're looking at right now is the new skin. It's called Page Builder, and I've talked about this last week. It's more than just a skin. It's really more about functionality and improving that experience of the pages that you're building and the way that you work to develop their experience of your users. So we do a lot inside of App Builder, and that's where you define your entities and workflows and things like that. And it generates a good start off point for you of this UI. But a lot of times you need to personalize and tune things here. And sometimes you find yourself having to jump back and forth between App Builder and your actual application. So now I'm sitting here, I'm looking at the new skin of Page Builder. First thing you'll notice is that it's a horizontal navigation instead of the vertical. So you still have the ability to add additional menus and things if you did need to make use of, perhaps you have a bunch of child pages underneath a parent and you want to allow navigation for that, you can still do things like that. I think once we get this one out, we're going to go ahead and make another template or configuration for the Page Builder that will do the vertical navigation that's similar to what you have now in Plant an App. So you can kind of get the best of both worlds. You can upgrade, not have things radically change on you or break. But I see that happening over the course of Q1, and I think eventually we'll phase out what I'm already starting to call the older legacy Plant an App skin in favor of the Page Builder, which is a lot more flexible. So other than the navigation, the big thing that you'll notice here is we have our little gear that brings up configuration, and there's a lot of new things. You still have the ability to pull in and edit or configure your various modules and things that you have on the page. And what you'll see though is, and I'll show this in a second, where you've probably seen in these low-code cafes, whenever we're demoing or doing things, and you've run into this as well, you hit the X, you close things out, your changes aren't reflected, right? And so what we have now when you bring things in is that if you, and when you make your change, after you save, rather than just hitting the X to close and go away, you can hit this little refresh. And what it'll do is not only close it, but refresh the page for you in one move so that you can see your changes take effect. And where it starts getting really powerful, we'll start with the UI settings. You now have the ability to customize the primary color. This doesn't just impact the menu, but also your detail pages, things like that. It kind of becomes your overarching color. You have an accent color, which the button of your listing and your forms and things, whenever they're set to default, which is what most things come out of the box with when you do a form or a listing, you'll have uniform ability to control what you want that default primary take action color to be out of the box. You can always pick a different type, like warning or success. These things are still the Bootstrap color scheme. It's really that default that normally is white that you have the ability to control and override, as well as being able to change your menu font. And if I hit save here, all of my pages will honor this going forward. In this case, it's also funny the way colors work. It's easy to make some very ugly color schemes. So I recommend a color wheel and using complementary colors to get some nice things that go well together. But kind of some of the big features is, like I was saying, when you're sitting here and having to switch back and forth between App Builder, you no longer need to do that. You can now just hit App Builder. It'll slide it in. So there's times maybe where you're working in a page, you're working, configuring a form or something like that, and let's say you have a workflow, and you need to come and make a change to the workflow to test. So you can just slide this in by bringing App Builder in, make your change, and then either refresh or just dismiss. If you refresh, you hit your submit button on your form or whatever inside of your page that you're on, those changes will be picked up right there. So no need to leave where you're at in your headspace and jump back and forth between things. So you can just slide this in While I'm here showing workflows, I know we've talked about this one a lot over the last several weeks. I did want to show the new cloning functionality. And so I'll widen my screen up here a little bit more. So you can see that I have this testing workflow here. And there's a new button called duplicate. And when I hit it, it's going to make a copy of the workflow for me. And I can go in. It has everything that the other one has, all the inputs, all the outputs, and all I really need to do is come and change the name, right? So this is great when you've got workflows that either are just variants of each other, very slight differentiation between them, and you want to basically say, look, I want everything this one does, except a few things are a little bit different. Or sometimes you just maybe have some really complex actions in there that you've wired up and done that you want to reuse, and you can just delete maybe the other actions you don't need. But it makes for a really good starting point to jumpstart what you need to do with a workflow that's very similar to another. This for us also, as we move into the release after this one, from what we've built technically is the foundation for being able to export and import workflows. So if I can copy them, I now can export them out and then import them into other instances, which will open up a whole world of sharing and being able to save a lot of time between your applications or helping each other out, either with us or on the community portal. Little note here just on how this works. If I keep cloning this one, it's going to increment the numbering. So you don't have to worry about naming conflicts or anything like that. It'll just keep going until you start changing the names of them. And then lastly, a lot of times, just kind of as a quick shortcut, when you have a page that's based on an entity, as this one was, and I want to make a change, and we'll kind of bring this all together and see it in action. If it's sourced off of an app builder entity, you'll see this entity option here. And when I hit that, it takes me right into this entity. So if I wanted to come and add another field, I'll save, I'll override. Everything looks good. I hit the refresh, and you'll see without ever leaving anything, all my grids, all my forms, everything is now accounting for this new field without me ever having to leave the page I'm on. And so everything just works. It's hopefully kind of our new motto. Everything just works is what the theme of 2021 is going to be. A lot of new cool stuff coming, but we want to make sure it's really making the best possible experience for you. So that's just kind of what's coming here. Like I said, this will be available as a release candidate next week. And if the stars and sun and moon align, then we'll have this shipped on the 28th. Otherwise, very quickly after we all come back from holiday, we'll get this one out. And so if there's no questions, then I will turn it on over. I think I see a couple things in chat. What about renaming entities? I see some errors when entities has relation to other entities. Thank you, Hans, for keeping us on our toes always. Yes, I found that too, and we have fixed that in this release. So the renaming issue when entities are linked. Renaming always has worked, but when you are using like a list of entities or one entity is got a property that's tied to another entity, the renaming wasn't propagating all the way throughout the application. It would still rename, right, the entity itself and the page of that entity itself. So for example, here I've got products, which links to product categories as a dropdown, right? And if I renamed product categories, products page and UI would not have picked that up. So we have fixed that, and that is in this release 1.11.
So aside from that comment, I would just say those are some great UI changes. And I like the motto, it just works. On your workflows, I'm excited for that. Oftentimes, another use case for that might be you're going to come up with a new version of something, but you want to keep the old one around. So being able to say, start from that spot and enhance it and move on. Yep.
Yeah.
So very good.
Yeah, and then just through renaming, right? So let's say I have test workflow. That's what's live in my application, and I want to do something different. I can copy or clone that test, make my changes, test it right there in workflow. Once I see that that's the one I want, I can get rid of the old one and just rename this one. Everything should just pick that up.
Terrific.
Yeah.
So in a little bit, Robert is going to come on with some talking about how we can extend item data sources. And so I'm here to support and kind of introduce that topic a little bit. I think probably most of our audience are familiar with item data sources, and I thought I was too, but it turns out that there were some features that I wasn't taking advantage of. So I just wanted to explore that just a little bit before we do the deep dive with Robert. So I've set up a little bit of a form here, and I'm going to modify it, set up the manage. And it's really a pretty simple form. I've got a button that shows values, and that's just simply through an error message. And then I have some items here in a list. So let's take a look a little bit before we use it to see how that's set up. The dropdown itself is a multiple choice with dropdown. I've called it dropdown, and I just have an item list. And so I've typed in 3 US states, and the abbreviations for the states are divided by the pipe character. So the left side is going to be what's publicly visible. The right side is going to be the value part of that. So in digging into this, what I've been using dropdowns for a long time, and they just so make sense that I never looked at the help text. And it turns out that there's some of these other values that are automatically populated that I didn't even realize were there. So I've just been using the default value, but you can access either side you want, the text value or the value of the property. And so I wanted to just kind of to demonstrate what that looks like. So if I pick, for example, Texas and hit show values, my error message is showing the default value, which is TX, which is the internal value, but you can be explicit. The text is Texas, the value is TX, and then there's a property I didn't even know was on there, the path property on some of these that puts a slash in front of it. So if I pick a different value and show it, we see, I've just always been using the default value and didn't realize that the text property was even there for me to use to pick that up. But typically as a developer, I want to use this value property. That's the thing that matches in my database, but you present the nice and expanded version to your users. So with that, I just wanted to kind of explore a little bit about what kinds of things are in there besides items. Items is the default one, but there's a great number of them that come in. And so, for example, if you want your list of users, there is a DNN Users one that's in there, and you can pick users by role. So I'm just going to, all of the registered users on my system, I'm just going to change this drop down to display that. And so when I refresh this, and I'm not using the new Plantain app, so I have to refresh it by hand. But when I refresh this and hit show values, I can see now we've got a list of users for this drop down, and it has a default value is the value 2, but we can still pull out the name, and then there's this path parameter. So I just encourage you, and actually I did a low-code feature-focused video, just published it, and so if you do I'll make sure to include the link on that one. But I just explored about half a dozen of the various ones that are available in this data source list. There's quite a few that are available that are standard and useful. The one more thing that I learned in exploring this was if you pick, instead of using the multiple choice with dropdown, I'm going to flip it to using it with checkboxes and see the changes that we get out of that. So again, refreshing, we see our same data source, and it allows us, because there's checkboxes, it allows us to pick many, and I'm going to pick all of those. And then what we see, the value is this 2, 4, 5, the user IDs that I've selected. We see the names comma delimited, But then the value contains JSON, which you could use in a number of ways. You could load that as an entity and iterate through it. So I didn't realize that the value was possible to return that JSON, and so that's very useful. Now, we got a great question from Albert asking how to use the path option. And I don't know, I discovered that about 10 minutes before this. If any of the Plantin' team know what the intention is behind path, that would be great. But oh, Bogdan.
It works with linked dropdowns. So if you have two dropdowns that you use the linked option, you know, you could have the same option with the same value twice in a dropdown, but it belongs to different parent dropdown item, right? So you can create dependencies between dropdowns. And the path will tell you either the value came from the first option in the first dropdown or from the second option in the first dropdown, right? So you can differentiate between the two.
Very good. I'll have to explore that a little bit more. But in any case, these properties are documented in the documentation. This is where I picked it up, but it's also in the fine print for the item data source, so you can see where those properties are. And so that's just a kind of a little bit about the standard data sources and the properties that are there. And then it just kind of brings up the topic of extending the data source that Robert's going to jump into. And this is really, if you can often load content into an item an item for either checkboxes or drop downs that make it real easy for your users to pick. But extending these, putting in a custom item data source is going to give you a better experience for your citizen developers, and it just simplifies the complex. If you wanted to go out and for example, load the properties of a contact from HubSpot, rather than having to know the values in advance, you can dynamically use an item data source to get that to happen. So with that, I am going to stop sharing and pass it to Robert to show how you might go about a custom item data source.
Thank you, Dale. So let me share my screen. I hope you can hear me. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So let's open the code. So this is the same project. So what I'm going to do is to extend the HubSpot integration by adding two new item data sources. One to list all the objects in the HubSpot, actually all the properties of the contact object in HubSpot, and the other one would be to return the option values in dropdowns and radio boxes and so on in HubSpot, so that afterward we can improve our implementation that we developed in the past few months or so. Okay, so we'll start by creating a new folder here to keep everything tidy. Okay, and create a new CS file. Get what we need to implement an item data source is an interface called item data source. Actually, we have a couple of them. This is not the only one, but I will show it immediately. So it's quite simple one. You basically need to implement this get data method, which returns a list or an enumerable of items. And if we look closer at the list item, we'll start to recognize those tokens, the text, the value, and the path. There are a couple more that are not exposed, or I think some of them are, but we didn't market them, let's say. So this is our basic object that you need to return to work with our item data sources. This also supports, as Bogdan said, hierarchical data sources. So you can have the paths for the tabs or the pages in DNN, for example, and you can filter them out. So for example, as Bogdan said, in one drop-down, select a parent page and then view all the child pages in that parent page and so on. So it's pretty flexible. But as you can notice here in the list of parameters, you don't have access to the context of the execution, so you don't have access to tokenizations, tokenization and things like that. So we have another implementation for that, another interface, and it's item data source with context. And this again has the same get data. Sorry, I'm not sure. Okay, it has the same get data method, but now you have access to the context and a few other things. I will try to explain them. And then there are a couple more, but I will not go into them because they're pretty complicated, and I will not have time in the 30 minutes or so. There is a searchable item data source, so you will receive a search text that you can use to query the underlying service that you bring your data from, and the one with the hierarchy that you can filter the items based on the parent. But we will implement those two. It's really needed to implement the first one, even if you really want to only use the one with the context. It's needed because on our code we rely on it, so it's basically a must. So we need to implement this both. And what I'm going to do is copy some code, because it would be boring to see me write a bunch of code. So first of all, I will implement the first one without the context, and I will just pass in this, let's call it fake context, because I really need the portal settings here, as you will see, and I am just calling myself back on the other implementation, and the actual implementation will happen only in the second one, because as I said, I really need the context so that I am able to get the credentials. If you remember from the previous thing that we did, the action, we need some credentials to connect to HubSpot, and we need to retrieve them. So again, some of the things here were presented in that session, so I will skip a few things here and there, but let's hope it's not that difficult. Okay, so I will also need this utils class, so let's create it quickly.
So the goal for this first one is we're going to return the properties from HubSpot.
Yeah, we will return the properties from the contacts. It basically can return any properties from any object, but I hard-coded for the presentation. I hard-coded them to only return from the contact. Yeah. So I will go into this quickly, but let's make the code work first. So okay, so I'm retrieving the credentials here. It's a bit more tricky in the item data sources. So an item data source can be used in, let's say, the backend code. So you can use it in your actions configs. So you can have parameters to the actions that return the items from the data source. So you can select them. And also you can use them on the front end in the action form fields and so on. So to account for all those scenarios, we have this dictionary here, which has the container parameters. Container is the thing that executes the item data source. So as I said, the action form field or the action parameter in the admin screen. So this is kind of a generic way to add all that data there. So what I'm doing, I'm searching into that container for the credentials parameter, and I'm doing it in a tricky way. So unfortunately you'll have to debug the code a bit and see what you receive in these container parameters. It has a long life behind, so it went through iterations and iterations, and it's not the greatest way to do things, but yeah, it works. So so what I'm doing, I'm getting the data source from the container. So the data source is basically the definition for my item data source that the container executed to get its values. And then I'm getting the parameters properties, the property of the data source. And then I'm trying to find my parameter, my credentials parameter in my case, either in the entire container, if for some reason. So this is like some kind of inheritance for the parameters. You can have the parameter at container level, you can have it at the data source level, or you can have it as a parameter of the data source. So that's why this is a very long thing here that returns that value. Okay, so back here, I'm trying first to get the parameter value as an action credentials object. I presented it in the create contact action here. It's basically the same class that it's used to hold the credentials. And then for some legacy code and such, we need to actually retrieve the parameter value as a dictionary, as a plain dictionary. And then the action credentials class has a load from dictionary method that can handle it and return the action credential itself. So that's about it. Again, this is exactly the same thing that retrieves the API key as in the action. We are again creating the service to make the request. We are now requesting the properties / contacts API. For the action, we were accessing the object / contacts. This properties endpoint, as seen in the documentation here. Let me hide the. Is there a way to hide this? No. Okay. So as you can see in their documentation, you can access any object by its object type. I'm not sure where you can find all of them. I mean, there is something here with objects, these ones. I think the names that you find here, this is what you actually need to put in. And then there is a custom object feature that it might return the properties from here or not. I'm not sure.
This is the definition that's provided by HubSpot to say, what can I get? And so we're just implementing that.
Exactly. So I'm calling, as I said, this API, and you don't really need to add anything to it. And here is the example for the response that it provides. So you have an object with a results property, which is the array of properties. And then you have some paging stuff here. I didn't implement paging, so you will need to do so to get all the parameters, because there are quite a few. You will see immediately. And yeah, I will go through the object here as we go along. So let me see. We are sending the request of type get. We are checking and making sure that we receive the proper response, otherwise we'll throw an error. It will be a bit tricky to see this error. Usually you need to keep your browser console open and look for the get data request and see if there is an error in that request. Otherwise, sometimes, for example, in the admin screen of our products, you will not see the error there. It will just be an empty dropdown. Okay, so what I need here, I am deserializing into an object that I have already created here. I think it's this one. So as you've seen, we have the results property, and then it is a list of property metadata which has the label and the name, and that's all we really need for this. As you saw here, there are a couple more things, but we only need the name and the label here. So yeah, I just retrieve that so that we don't do additional work. And then having this object, I'm ordering the properties by their label, and I'm mapping each property to that list item object. It has multiple constructors. This one has the value and the text. You can also have path, but this is for the hierarchical one, and I think that's all of them. I mean, you can only have text, which will put the text value as well. So you have both of them, and yeah, that's about it. And I'm just returning them from this get data here. So next thing would be to create the config for it. Let me. So this is okay. Let me see if I can do it like this. Folder. Paste. Perfect. So this is the data source for an item data source. It's a config for the item data source. Sorry. You need an ID, and this ID needs to be unique for the data source. So if you have collisions here, you'll have issues. Then you need to specify the type string for the class that will handle the data source, and you can get it from here, the namespace and the name of the class. You need to give it a title, and then you have a list of parameters. For this one, we only need the credentials, and it's basically the same value as in the create contact JSON. I think it's identical. I didn't put the help text, but the rest it's the same. Well, it's called credentials instead of HubSpot credentials, but that's not okay. And this is basically it on creating the data sources. I will quickly create the other one so that, or actually, let me just open the other project and show it quickly. Do I have it here? Maybe not. So here we have the select field options. It's almost the same. We have the same thing here, creating a fake context. Then we create get the credentials. Then we get the property name parameter, because we need to know for which property of the object to retrieve the options. I'm returning an empty list here if you didn't provide a property name, so we don't do redundant calls to their API. The API to get the property options is adding the property name to the other one. So it's properties / object type / the property that you want. And basically it's the same. Again, I have a class here that maps the entire thing. And we get the label and the value again from each option and returning them. I didn't sort them here, but I can simply do it. Usually there are not that many, so and that's about it. And again, the config for this one should be here somewhere. Let me. So it's basically the same in the first part, just mapping the proper types there, and then you have the property name here as a simple text input. Okay, so let's try to implement this here on our demo site. So let me connect to it and copy everything there.
So I find myself trying to keep up. It sounds very much like you're doing about 3 things at once. You've coded for both retrieving properties and for retrieving the values that are acceptable for a particular property in HubSpot. And that was the target of what we were trying to do, to be able to better query HubSpot and to do the difficult part of encapsulating that so that a citizen developer could use those things in our directly within our product. And that's the part we're going to see here in a second, how to use what you've done.
Yeah, so I'm copying everything where it's supposed to be. So again, as the actions are here, then the item data sources are here. So and I've also made a change to the action to use the one of the data sources. So I will copy this as well, and I will also show you the difference. So I have it here. So this is the config for the action. And we replaced that name value collection field for the input parameters, input properties, sorry, of the action with a grid parameter. And we basically configured a name value collection that way. But for the property name, we are using a select dropdown, and we are passing in the get object properties data source. So this is how you would do it for a normal property as well. You need to specify this data source property into the settings of the parameter. These two things, this will hide the label that is put beside the column. I will show you in a second. And this is the column size for the column.
for the display. Yep.
Yeah, when displaying these things, it respects the Bootstrap grid structure. So you have all the parameters here in this. You need to account to 12. Actually, we have a delete button on each row, so it would be something like 10 or 11. I'm not sure how wide the button is. And then to use parameters in this data source here, you need to pass this interpolate through, and then you can just pass the parameters to the data source here, and we are just reusing the parameter from the action here. So what you select here in the action, this is what it's used when querying for the items for the dropdown. So that's about it. This is the property value. It's a simple text with nothing special, and that's basically the change to the action config. And there is also a change to the action itself. So in the past, it was a dictionary of string, if I remember correctly. And because we changed it to a grid parameter in the config, we now need to use this list of items class. And the other changes here, basically, in the past, we just map this input properties by getting the key and tokenizing the value, but now it's a bit more complex. So we need to get each row and convert it to a settings dictionary, and then we need to get each column from each row. So we need from that item to retrieve the property name column. And then we need to get a property value so the second column from the row, from the current row, and apply the tokenization on that. So the value still supports tokenization, but the property name doesn't. And I think that was the case in the past as well. So nothing changed there, just a bit of manipulation here to make things work. And everything else is the same here. So let's see if the site still works.
So the changes you implemented forced a recompile of the site.
Yeah, I've copied DLL in the bin folder, and it restarts the site. And it takes a little more than usual, but that's how it happens. Okay, so nothing broke. They will edit this and basically add a select here. Actually, it's drop down. This one should be enough, and I should be able to find the object properties here. It's auto-populated with my credentials, but I think they are not correct, so I'll have to update them real quick here. And that's basically it. Let me put this above the submit there. And see if it works. So it works, and it returned everything. And as I said, there are a lot of them. It looks like it went up until W. There might be more. I'm not sure, but yeah, this is the first page of the properties. So yeah, as I said, there are a lot of them.
these are all the properties that are coming from HubSpot, and so you could just pick one. And did we save the ID behind it? Was that?
Yeah. The idea of the field is behind it. And I could also go into the action in our workflow. If I remember which one, maybe this one. Create HubSpot in contact in sorry, create contact in HubSpot. Yeah, so this is the one. It's already selected. So you here have the drop down instead of the text box, so you can search for email. I think it was one of them, and you can use the tokens here. I think it's email. I'm not sure.
So before we had to go out of our product, look in HubSpot, do this lookup all by ourselves, and then type the name. And now these properties are just built into the product.
Yeah, and you needed to know what the property, let's call it ID, was in HubSpot, because some of them were with underline, some of them were like first name was first name one after the other. Some of them, as I said, had underscores and things like that. So yeah, it was a bit
so this again has improved the citizen developer experience. If you want to set a new property in HubSpot, you just find it by name, good to go. It's simplified the complex.
Yeah, and as I said, you don't need to input here the credential twice or something like that for the second parameter to work. It already takes it from here. So as you saw, the change is not that huge in the config. So you just need to pass in here the data source and pass in the credentials like this. So parent object is the action config object, let's say.
Perfect.
And you access the parameters, which is this one, and then you access the credentials here. So that's about it.
Great. I see we've hit right at time.
Yeah.
There was a question early on talking about I think it was from my segment talking about the pipe. If there was a way to use a different delimiter, and to my knowledge at this point it is only the pipe, and for dividing the value in the text, and there is not support for additional columns.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what I've done with my Zoom screen, and yeah, I hit hide somewhere, so I am not able to see the screen or close the.
It might be minimized
every time, Robert.
It's really not from what I can only exit, but I can't do anything else.
I think the idea, so maybe if you I will share my screen so you stop yours, so then you'll see the UI. So I think, the idea is that if you use the manual item data source and you type entries one by one, the pipe delimiter is the only option. But again, the bigger picture and what Robert and Dale showed us today is that you can get more data sources that are more specific, that are integrated with other systems, so you don't have to keep this kind of, let's call them dictionaries, lists of names twice. You don't have to manage them twice. Cool. So I hope this was very, very useful to you. Now you know a new way in which you can extend the platform, in which you can reuse this data that you have in other systems without having to create duplicates and then losing the connection between them. Is the third way of extending the platform that we show so far. We have many more ways that we'll demonstrate to you during the next webinars. So thanks again for being here, and please know that next week we'll have Santa coming to our webinar. We'll have a special Christmas edition. We will not do any of these hands-on development things. Instead, we'll have like an open discussion, an open panel about the future, about what we as a community and as a team want to see happening in 2021. So Plant an App, DNN Sharp, makes a big difference in the world compared to what is available today. So Thanks a lot for being here, and see you next time to have that interesting discussion. Have a nice day / evening, everyone. Thank you.